Hi everyone, welcome to my trial video. Trial webinar, first one, but I thought I might put some thoughts down and have a chat to people and see whether that was of value to people so that I can keep doing this on a regular basis. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope it'll be a worthwhile exercise for you because as you know, I'm pretty passionate about this. So bear with me because it's the first one I've done, so I might have some technical issues perhaps that might happen. So anyway, let's get moving with it, and yeah, feel free to chat, and we'll get going. So just bear with me one moment, and we will start the webinar which is of course about creating wealth through property. So I will just talk about that in great detail, of course, and then let's talk about creating wealth through property. As you know, this is an important aspect, and yet, as you will discover as we go along, that there's not a lot of people who really think about this to any great extent because, you know, it's just not in our education system, it's probably fair to say, and most people don't know where to look, don't know where to start. So the question to ask yourself is, are you wealthy? Well, again, what is wealth? You know, and some people might not necessarily think about it as money, but at the same time, if you want a reasonable lifestyle, you have to have a certain amount of money. So if you don't have that, the question is, okay, why not? And then looking in the mirror, you would say, okay, so what's holding me back, you know? The question is, I suppose, would you like to do it? And would you know how to do it? Because I suppose it seems a little bit of a minefield for a lot of people. So, you know, I would like to be able to help and assist in that regard. But the things to look at, obviously, in a general sense, which most people do, is look at property. And of course, some people look at shares, some people look at using cash in the bank, in deposits, etc. Obviously, being around property for 40 plus years, I'm pretty biased about property. And we'll go through the difference between property and shares, of course, as we go along. And I'll tell you, and it's not so much being biased, it's more to do with the facts speak for themselves, in my opinion anyway. So before we start, as I said, you need to know what is your worth. And a lot of people probably don't sit down and think about that to any great extent. And of course, if you're looking to invest, you need to know how much money you can borrow. And of course, once you've reached that point, then you can say, okay, well, what will I now buy? Just to give you a little bit of information about myself, as you may or may not know, I've been 40 years dealing with property and real estate. I'm currently doing property development and, of course, some property advocacy along with that. Prior to that, I worked in many years as a real estate agent, and I also did real estate auctions. And I'm very happy to say that, you know, I have won many awards. In fact, my storage system is full of them, but I don't necessarily think about that too much anyway. But after 44 years of being around property and real estate, this probably epitomizes what I feel about property. And here's a picture of a young man who waited for the price of real estate to come down. And as you can see, he's now an old man and he's still waiting. And the reality is that in Victoria, it just does not go down. And I'll show you that as we go along. So the question is, where do we start? this is one of my favorite diagrams, I guess you'd fair to say. It's, if you can see, it's encompassed by mindset. Now, till that is right, probably all the other aspects of knowledge and strategy and action are probably wasted in a sense, because if your mind is not right, you're never going to achieve the right situation. I suppose I've spent a lot of time on getting my mind right, and I'm more than happy to share some of that knowledge as well in due course. But the first thing to get, obviously, is to get the right knowledge. That's the foundation, obviously, of creating wealth. The right strategy, which is devised by looking at your personal situation and coming up with a plan for you. And of course, then taking the right action. Now, whether you do this yourself or you have someone help you with it, well, that's your decision, of course. But as I said, the overarching aspect of this, no doubt, would be having the right mindset. So let's look at the current situation in Australia, okay? Now, this might come as a shock and maybe come as a surprise, but this is from ABS statistics. Over 80% of couples retire on less than $35,000 per annum. Now, to me, that's a shocking statistic, considering the fact that Australia is such an abundant place, there's wealth and there's opportunity and all of that, and yet to think that 80% of couples retire on less than 35 grand just doesn't seem right to me. And this is one of the reasons why I'm passionate about it, because I want to help people achieve a lot more than that. Now, here we are, we're talking about a comfortable lifestyle for a couple is set around 60 grand per annum. And that's the minimum, I would have thought, for a couple to live on. Bearing in mind, a lot of people say, oh, I own my house. Well, that's great, but that's not helping you with your wealth creation, except for the fact that your house is going up in value, but you're not creating any income stream off it. So if you wanted $60,000 a year income, you need to have $2 million in the bank. Or obviously income from property or investment. So think about that. So how is it looking for you? When you start to look at your own situation, if you're really honest with yourself, are you going to be part of that 80% of people? Or are you going to do something about it and start doing something about it? Okay, because one of the most important things is, are you saving money? Are you saving at all? Have you started? How many yeses am I going to get, from you if about that? Let's have a look. Okay, so how many of you have started to save? That was my question. So, yeah, there you go. Not a lot, is there? So this is the problem. So let's keep going. So coming back to the question about saving, and now the question is, all right, saving, if you increase the value of your house, of course, and you've got money sitting there in an asset situation, okay, so you don't necessarily have to save that money because that's been saved for you automatically, so to speak. So you can always use that. But anyway, the question is, do you want to work for the money or do you want the money to work for you? That is a very important question. Okay, this is if you go to the It's a Breeze channel of YouTube, I made this video. It's a very short video, but it kind of encapsulates my thoughts about on this subject, you know, why 70% of Australians do not think about their retirement plans. As I said at the onset, it's also to do with a lot of education. Our education system, I don't think, pushes this fact at all. So if you have the time and the inclination, go on YouTube, It's a Breeze channel. You'll see my mug there, and you can check why 70% of Australians don't think about their retirement plans, and hopefully that'll get you going. So let's look at the stats about Australian wealth. This is pretty sad looking chart, really, when you stop to think about it. If you look at the left-hand side, the green map of Australia, the top box is 20% of households earn 49% of the income. That is, and the bottom 20%, only 4% of the income. Now, don't you think that for a country like this, that's a crazy, crazy differential? There should be a lot more people earning a lot more money than that. I'm sure you'll agree with me. Moving to the other side, the highest 20% own 62% of the wealth. And the bottom 20%, just 0.9, not even 10% of the private wealth of this country, which is, again, as I said, an unbelievable statistics, you know. The wealth of the average household in the top 20% is 71 times the average wealth of those in the bottom 20%. So that is a stat that I would love to see change. And this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. So does that shock you? It probably does, yeah? Here's the story in terms of stats, again, coming back to the statistics that we have. The graphic story of 100 young people now aged 25 and 40 years later in retirement. Sadly, nearly 60% will be flat broke and dependent on Social Security and charity. 27% will, of course, sadly be passed away. 9% will be working, and only 4% will be financially independent, and of course 1% rich. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody wants to be rich, but certainly financially independent is a good place to be. And I'm sure that most people would say, yes, that's what I would like to be, but then it comes back to the fact that 80% are not. So, you know, does that 80% include you? That's the reality. And maybe you might think not, but if you really take a hard, close look at yourself, you might find that you're heading that way. And I hope not. That's why we're here to change that. So let's talk about saving money. I mean, if you like anything like me, I was guilty of this. At 21 to 30, I'm still young. Wait until I'm making more money, then I'll save. At 30 to 45, you know, people have family, they've got children, go to school and all of that. So they say, oh, well, I will save as soon as the kids grow older. 45 to 55, I have to pay children's college fees, university fees, then I will save. 55 to 65, oh, well, it's not easy for a person of my age to get a better job. I'll wait until then I will save. And then when you get to sort of the pensionable age, you say, oh my God, my pension doesn't go this far at all. There's no income. I wish I'd started years ago. Let's talk about starting now, okay? So I thought we'll just have a look at some quotes from some very, very wealthy people. I mean, everybody probably knows Andrew Carnegie. He built the Carnegie Hall. That was his part of giving back to the community. And he said 90% of all millionaires become so through owning real estate. The wise young man or wage earner of today invests his money in real estate. And he should not. And that's what he espouses. You probably heard of Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, talked about real estate investing, even on a very small scale, remains a tried and true means of building an individual's cash flow and wealth. Well, I couldn't agree more. Real estate is at the core of almost every business, and it's certainly at the core of most people's wealth. In order to build your wealth and improve your business smarts, you need to know about real estate. It's pretty simple, isn't it? I mean, really, when it comes to that. This is Russell Sage. Now, the reality is I hadn't really heard of him much, but from my study about him more recently, I've come to know that he was also a very philanthropic person, did a lot for the community, and he built up massive money going back some years ago, of course. Real estate is an imperishable asset, ever increasing in value. It is the most solid security that human ingenuity has devised. It is the basis of all security and about the only indestructible security. How true is that, hey? But as the saying goes, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Are you ready to take that step? If you are ready, please type in yes in the chat box. That's good. People wanting to make a start, well, that's awesome. Okay, so let's keep going. So you're ready. Here are the steps. As I said before the start, start with the end in mind. So number one, you need to decide where you want to be in 10 or 20 or 30 years, depending on obviously how old you are, before you make your plan. Start with the end in mind. Now, when I come back to the issue of mindset, this is where mindset really kicks in, because most people will hold themselves back and not make a plan that they would really like, but a plan where logic perhaps takes over. And I would ask you in this situation, before you decide where you want to be, let your mind loose, really relax about it. And why not think big? You know, thinking big is good. So analyze where you are now. And of course, what the difference between the two is where you are now and where you want to be is the gap that needs to be planned and filled. Now, that might seem a massive gulf to some if you're really, thinking about that and think, oh no, that'll never happen, that won't happen. But the reality is that it can happen, and that's what I'm here to say. But there are many solutions, but you need to create your own. Now, how you do that, again, is up to you. So you've analyzed where you want to be. Now we've looked at the issues of property or shares or cash. Okay, so let's look at that, because as I said, I'm biased towards property, but let's have a look at the share index. Now, from my reading and my knowledge, the ASX is manipulated. People might not realize that, but when the company is not performing to the best of it as it should, they replace it with another company. So it's not a clear indication of how the share market is really tracking. But if you look at this chart, you look at it and you'll see at the 10-year chart of the All Ords, you can see quite clearly how far away the last bull market high was, right? If you look at the chart, going back there, you can see how it went up, 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 and then it had the massive fall, of course. We know about that, but it's never fully recovered. So there you go, you know. So have a think about that. The chart, when you look at the chart, as I said, even if there was a mini rally, the market would still be around the same level as late 2009. So, and the All Ords was around 6,500 late in 2007, and today it's well under 6,000. So in that 10-year gap, if the share market hasn't improved, the All Ords is actually less than what it was 10 years ago. How could you say that shares stack up as a good investment? Anyway, that's my story anyway. But now let's look at how the price of houses have performed over the last 10 years, from 2007 to 2017. Now this graph comes from Real Estate Institute of Victoria. Now, if you look at it, in 2007, it was just under $400,000. And now, in 2017, it's above $800,000. So you don't have to be a mathematician to work out that it's doubled in that 10 years, which is what I always maintain it does. If you look at units, it was above $300,000, and today it's inching towards $600,000. Hasn't probably done exactly the same as single dwellings, but it's doing it all the same, yeah? In 2007, as I said, the median was around 400,000, and now it's 2017, it's over $800,000. But the thing to think about is that this happened without you doing anything. You didn't have to do anything about it. It just went on and on as it usually does. And I said, I particularly love Victorian real estate because that's what I know. I've studied property markets in other states. Of course, Sydney is very strong as well, but of course it's probably a little bit too expensive for most people. So if you look at, you know, around the country of Australia, the reality is that Victoria is probably a great place to invest because it's steady as she goes. You can't say that about Perth or WA. You can't say that about Queensland. They're up and down, up and down. Tassie is very slow, of course, and doesn't, although it's getting a bit of attention at the moment. And the other states are really not that great in terms of capital growth. Now, speaking from my own experience, in 1975 in Baronia, I was selling house and land. They're not new, some new, but mostly established houses for around the $15,000 mark. And today, those same houses are around the $700,000 mark. So you can see how the value has doubled more than 5 times in 40 years. And again, this happened without you doing anything. You were sleeping, and all of that price increase happened, which is quite incredible. Today, the median price for a house in Melbourne is in excess of $800,000, as I said. So would you agree that property is a better investment than shares? If you do, please type yes in the chat box, and then we can see how you feel about that situation yourself, yeah? 1 second, I'll just do something here. Okay, I'm glad you agree. All righty, so let's keep going. Oop. Bit of fumbling around here. So, as I said, there's residential and there's obviously various types of property to invest in. There's residential, and if we look at the stats about residential, it's around rental property we're talking about, whether it be a house or a unit. Sometimes units are a bit stronger with the rent than houses. It's around about the 4 to 5% return. Plus, of course, don't forget, it's the capital growth is 7 to 10%, right? So you need to add those two factors in to total 11 to 15% per annum. Now, people probably don't think too much about the capital growth aspect of them, only look at the return on investment. But you need to factor in the capital growth to really get the true picture. So you're looking in terms of property, you're looking at about, as I said, 11 to 15% per annum. Retail, which is of course shops, is around 7% return, plus of course capital growth. But that capital growth is to a certain extent based on the rental value of the property. So that to some degree has some bearing on the economy too, and all of that. The same goes for offices. Again, there's a dependency on the economy as to how many people want to start a new office. When it's, of course, if you look at, as a general rule, offices get about an 8% plus capital growth, again, based on the rental. Of course, there's industrial. Not a lot of people actually think about industrial, but it does return a higher return plus capital growth, probably because there's more risk factor, I suppose, involved in that. And of course, the 10% again is based on the rental that is being got from the property. As residential property, by the way, is purchased primarily for capital growth. Commercial and industrial property is primarily for cash flow. Now, capital growth obviously suits younger investors looking for the capital growth, which will enable them to purchase more property in due course and down the track by borrowing against the increased equity. And that's probably one of the most important factors in creating wealth through property, is utilizing that capital growth. So depending on your circumstances, obviously, you choose capital growth or cash flow. Now, of course, cash flow suits older investors who are looking for income after having purchased residential property earlier. So sometimes you can have a mix of residential and commercial or retail in your property portfolio, depending on, as I said, the age group that you are and where you are in your life. Now, deciding which one suits you, of course, has to be after your financial health check has been completed. And of course, once you've got your financial health check completed, then the question is which property and where. You can see, obviously, from what we've been through so far, there's many, many decisions you have to make before you decide what to buy and where. And as we've already talked about, this, of course, depends on your own circumstances and has to be decided after your financial health check. And of course, I'll be more than happy to arrange this for you. Generally speaking, most people buy a residential investment property because that's all they know. And although there's not a lot of teaching, as I said, about this in schools, there's plenty of property spruikers out there talking about, their properties, which generally speaking, dare I say, are fairly overpriced because they're pushing their own stuff. But generally speaking, it's fair to say that most people buy residential investment property because that's what they've observed other people, friends and family doing. But I believe that this is not always necessarily the appropriate path. So there are many ways to achieve wealth through property, but of course you can use different kinds of property for that purpose. Now, there's a lot to be said for syndication of getting a group of people together and doing development. That's one of the other ways. So the decision is easy, of course, as I say, if you have the right mindset, you have the right information and the right plan, but where did these come from? So this is where I suppose I can help you, and this is where I suppose I come in, because you can easy ways to have just an exploratory chat with me, and I can guide you and advise you. A 30-minute chat, and really, you could be on the road to financial freedom. For those who wish to do this, I will send you my 7-point checklist to get you on your way. So just type in "let's chat" and I will be in touch. So just in your chat box, type in "let's chat" and I will be in touch. Or before I go there, I thought I'd throw in a couple of slides, which is basically encompasses what we've been talking about for the last little while. And I touched on it in the presentation already. Landlords grow rich in their sleep. Pretty easy. Once the property is there and it's the right property in the right place, and the right property to suit you, you can sleep at night and your property is going up in price and the rent is coming in. And as Warren Buffett, and he should know better than anybody else, I think he's nearly the richest man in the world, or one of them. If you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. Comes back to that 80% who are, under $30,000 a year, which is crazy. So if you want to grow rich in your sleep and not work until you die, let's have a chat. You can copy my email or you can copy my mobile. I can obviously come back to you, but if you want to come back to me, my email is bertram@itsabreeze.com.au and my mobile number is 0418 313 299. I'll be really happy to sit down and have that 30-minute chat with you and sort of get you on your way. I'm sure that we could help you. Definitely, that's my promise. So that's all for today, and hope you enjoyed the situation. And I guess I look forward to chatting with you in the near future and to get you started in the wonderful world of property investment. As I said, creating wealth through property to some might seem like a daunting task. It might seem like, I don't know where to start and stuff like that. But the reality is, I can guide you in such a way, give you the right information, get you a nice action plan for yourself, and then we can take the right actions. But as I said at the onset, getting your mind right, that's pretty important too, So let's have a chat, and I hope you have a wonderful day today, and we will talk soon. Bye for now. See you later.